Hello, I'm Lou Brown and you're watching A News. Let's take a look at today's top stories. The United States vetoes the UN Security Council resolution demanding an immediate Gaza ceasefire. Donald Trump and Keir Starmer unveil technology prosperity deal, renewing the special relationship. And Azerbaijan marks the second anniversary of local anti-terror measures in Karabakh, which fully restored the country's territorial integrity. Now, the UN Security Council has failed to adopt a resolution calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. The United States vetoed the measure, leaving the release of hostages and the flow of humanitarian aid in limbo.
The United States has for a sixth time used its veto to block the United Nations Security Council efforts to halt the war in Gaza on Thursday. The draft resolution was demanding an immediate, unconditional and permanent ceasefire, the release of hostages and unrestricted humanitarian aid deliveries. 14 of the Council's 15 members voted in favour of it. The US said the draft was unbalanced, arguing it failed to condemn Hamas and ignored Israel's right to defend itself. But aid officials warn famine is already confirmed in Gaza City and surrounding areas, with civilians being killed while searching for food. The Palestinian ambassador to the UN, Riyad Mansour, says it's heartbreaking that the draft has been blocked.
This draft resolution represents the bare minimum that humanity, legality and morality dictate. It is deeply regrettable and painful that it has been blocked, preventing the Security Council from playing its rightful role in the face of these atrocities and to protect civilians in the face of genocide.
However, Israel praised the US for vetoing what it called a biased resolution. Ambassador Danny Danon said humanitarian aid continues to flow into Gaza, with hundreds of trucks and medical evacuations of people taking place. He also criticised the draft for failing to label Hamas as a terrorist organisation. The Council will reconvene on Gaza next week as world leaders gather in New York for the UN General Assembly.
Staying with UN affairs, world leaders are gathering next week in New York for the 80th UN General Assembly. New York officials said on Thursday the city is deploying thousands of police officers, drones and counter-terrorism units to secure next week's UN General Assembly, though they stressed there are no credible threats. Mayor Eric Adams said security would cover streets, subways, airspace and waterways as leaders from around the world gather for the annual debate. The General Assembly speeches begin on Tuesday with the 193-member world body hosting nearly 150 heads of state or government, along with dozens more ministers. Key topics are the Israel-Hamas conflict, Ukraine, Palestinian statehood and Iran's nuclear program. Looking to unrest in the US, protests have broken out across the country after ABC suspended Jimmy Kimmel's late-night show. Demonstrations in California and New York have sparked a wider debate over press freedom and government influence on the media. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump dismissed Kimmel, saying he had, quote, no talent.
Nationwide protests have erupted across the United States following ABC's suspension of Jimmy Kimmel's late-night show. In California, hundreds of demonstrators gathered outside Disney and ABC studios. Similar rallies took place in New York, where protesters assembled outside ABC's Soho headquarters, arguing that Kimmel's remarks were legitimate criticism, not hate speech. President Donald Trump criticised Kimmel, saying he had no talent, fueling further discussion and division over the controversy.
He could replace him. Guy had no talent. Kimmel he was fired, he had no talent. He's a whack job, but he had no talent, and more importantly than talent, he had no, because a lot of people have no talent, they get ratings. But he had no ratings. When you have a network and you have evening shows and all they do is hit Trump, all they do.
Kimmel was suspended over his comments during his opening monologue on Monday that allies of Charlie Kirk were using his assassination to score political points. He's not yet released a statement, leaving fans and critics speculating about his next move. ABC and Disney have not commented further on the suspension, citing internal review processes.
But if there is,
To US politics, President Donald Trump and First Lady Melania have left the UK following an unprecedented second state visit. Before departure, Trump held a press conference with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer to announce a major technology prosperity deal and fielded questions ranging from trade, global conflicts and illegal immigration. Both leaders have praised the signed agreements that will, according to Starmer, see billions flowing on both sides of the Atlantic. Trump hailed America's unbreakable bond with the UK and said there are only a few disagreements between the two.
We're forever joined, and we are forever friends, and we will always be friends. This enduring connection is why I was thrilled that the United Kingdom was the very first country with which we made a historic trade deal, and a very good trade deal. He's a tough negotiator. I think it was a better deal for you than us, but these are minor details.
So this partnership today is a signal of our determination to win this race together and to ensure it brings real benefits in jobs, in growth, in lower bills, to put more hard-earned cash in people's pockets at the end of each month.
Moving to the war in Ukraine, Russia launched a drone attack on Kyiv early Friday morning, according to Ukrainian officials. 2 air raid alerts were issued shortly after midnight. Fragments from a downed drone damaged the city's trolley bus lines, according to head of Kyiv's military administration. Debris fell in several locations, including a central road in the Shevchenkivsky district. Authorities reported no injuries. Turning attention to France, President Emmanuel Macron and his wife Brigitte are planning to present photographic and scientific evidence to a US court to prove Mrs. Macron is indeed a woman, according to their lawyer. The evidence will come in a defamation suit the Macrons filed against far-right influencer Candace Owens. Owens has baselessly claimed that Brigitte Macron was born a man and is therefore transgender. The influencer has sought to have the suit dismissed. In a recent filing, she and her lawyers said the move is a, quote, politically motivated attempt to suppress free speech and punish an American journalist for commentary protected under the First Amendment. No court date has been set yet. Now, Europe marks a major engineering milestone with the Brenner-based tunnel, set to become the world's longest underground rail link. The project promises faster travel and greener freight connections between Austria and Italy.
Crews have blasted through the final rock, marking a major milestone for a high-speed tunnel set to link Austria and Italy and transform travel across Europe. The Brenner-based tunnel, set to become the world's longest underground rail route, is a key part of the EU's plan to shift freight from roads to rail, reducing congestion and emissions. The breakthrough was celebrated in a ceremony attended by officials from both Italy and Austria.
Today, we're taking a decisive step together towards the construction and completion of one of the largest infrastructure projects on the entire continent. It is a historic day. It is a historic day not only for Italy, of course, but also for Austria and for the whole of Europe, as has been mentioned before me.
The tunnel, the first dedicated rail connection directly between the two nations, is expected to open in 2032 after delays of 16 years, with costs rising to $10 billion. The Brenner Pass, one of Europe's busiest alpine crossings, currently handles millions of trucks and tens of millions of tons of goods each year. The new tunnel, along with other major EU infrastructure projects, will dramatically reduce travel times between key cities, Verona to Munich by over 50%, Milan to Paris by roughly 30%.
The Formula One weekend in Baku is officially underway. Drivers are already on the track for their first practice and the city is buzzing with excitement. Let's head to the streets of Baku for the latest update from our own Narchek Jahangirli.
Engines are roaring, the streets of Baku are shaking, and the wait is finally over. Formula One is back in Azerbaijan. Round 17 of the season has just begun here on the shores of the Caspian, and the city circuit is alive with the sound of speed. Right now, the cars are out on track for the very first free practice. Drivers are testing their tires, reading the track and getting familiar with the conditions during this 1-hour session. These practice runs are especially important as Baku is one of the trickiest circuits in Afghan, particularly with its narrow corners. Mechanics and engineers are watching closely, gathering information from every lap to shape the race strategy for the next 2 days. The atmosphere in Baku is electric. Fans have filled the grandstands. The roar of the engines echoes between the city walls, and you can feel the speed as cars sweep past the shoreline at more than 300 kilometers per hour. Each team brings something different today. This season has been dominated by McLaren. The team already leads the championship by a huge margin, and today they arrive with a chance to secure the constructors' title much earlier than expected. Well, things are different for Ferrari as they are still chasing their first win of the season. Lewis Hamilton is looking to break his long podium drought, while Charles Leclerc, the qualifying king in Baku, will try once again to turn pole into victory. And of course, Red Bull's Max Verstappen comes here with fresh momentum after winning in Monza. Baku itself brings a special challenge. It's the only Formula One track that wins around a UNESCO heritage site. The medieval city walls, the ultra-narrow castle section and the 2.2-kilometer main straight make this circuit both beautiful and brutal. The smallest mistake can end the race in an instant. Traditionally, we expect the Azerbaijan Grand Prix to deliver high speeds, chaotic battles and no shortage of drama, with the famous castle section promising plenty of action. The weather today is sunny and warm, with track temperatures close to 25 degrees. Teams are paying attention because Saturday and Sunday are expected to be slightly cooler, with even a chance of rain. Up next is the second free practice session later this afternoon. The Formula One drivers will continue the work they began in the morning during the second free practice session, aiming to push the speed limits even further. And in just a couple of hours, we will already be able to share with you the outcomes of today's action here in Baku. I'm Narchek Jahangirli here with Natik Mehmedli, bringing you the latest updates from the Baku track.
Welcome back to A News. Now then, US President Donald Trump concluded his second state visit to the UK with a joint press conference alongside Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer at Chequers. The two leaders struck a notably warm tone despite key policy differences, with Trump describing disagreements as, quote, few. Starmer defended his government's decision to move towards recognising Palestinian statehood, stressing Hamas could play no part in any future state, while Trump said he, quote, disagreed but avoided confrontation. They also discussed Russia's war in Ukraine, with Starmer condemning recent Russian missile strikes in Kyiv and Trump admitting he had expected the conflict to be easier to resolve but felt obliged to pursue peace. On migration, Trump urged Starmer to consider using the military to stop channel crossings, warning illegal migration, quote, destroys countries from within. The pair also fielded questions on domestic controversies and wider values. Joining me now to unpack the key takeaways from the talks at Chequers is Andy Preston, political analyst and former mayor calling from North Yorkshire in the United Kingdom. Thank you for joining us.
Hi.
What message does the UK's decision to recognise Palestinian statehood send to allies like the US and Israel? Could this recognition undermine UK-US relations, or will both sides be able to move past it diplomatically?
I think both sides can definitely move past it, and I think that the UK's change in stance, and we're quite late. We're lagging the stance of other European nations and others across the world, of course, who have moved from a position of staunch support for Israel into a position that is critical of Israel's current actions. And I actually know that behind the scenes, or actually perhaps under the radar, the US population is moving to a very similar position. So while the stance of Donald Trump and the government may officially be one way, the US population is moving in line with the UK population, which has, again, fallen in line with mainstream European population, which has gone from staunch, outright, unwavering support of Israel for condemnation of the current acts.
And I just want to move on to another key foreign policy issue, which of course the war in Ukraine. How credible is Trump's claim he could have resolved the war in Ukraine more quickly if NATO allies meet his conditions? He also did praise NATO's efforts at this press conference.
I think Trump makes stuff up as he goes along regarding Ukraine and Putin. I think he sees how he feels on the day. Trump clearly has issues with standing up to Putin. For some reason, he won't ever do it properly. He threatens, but never does it. And that's why Putin is so bold, because Trump threatens to do stuff and never really follows through. So Putin knows and recognizes that pattern of behavior. But Trump promised to end the war, I think, in a day. I suspect, to be honest, it was kind of tongue-in-cheek. He could have ended it, I believe, if he had actually looked at the situation several months ago, and he could have persuaded Russia to halt where it was on the grounds that, and got Ukraine to accept it, if he'd promised to lend a lot of money and military support from the USA and NATO more generally to support Ukraine and stop any further advancement. But he chose not to do that. I think Trump would like to see that war end, but he doesn't seem to be willing to do anything significant. But if we're talking about UK politics here, I don't think that issue right now is really doing much here. The public are more tuned into Trump's state visit, the pageantry, the announcements of investment, and the sense of warmth. And most of the public has softened in their stance to Trump, and even Starmer.
Well, it's an interesting point you make there about UK politics, and I do want to guide you towards the semantics. Now, the press conference suggested Starmer and Trump have both personal chemistry that could bolster the special relationship. We've seen a deal on technology. We've seen a lot of positive attitudes towards each other. How could this benefit both sides?
You know, when you do business, when you have business relationships, allies that aren't necessarily personal, close friends, but people you're doing business with, if you spend more time with them, if you eat with them, if you hang out with them, you get closer, and trust builds up, and a fondness builds up. Fondness always comes from familiarity. So I think that's a natural thing that's happened. However, having said that, we all know what Trump is like. He's mercurial, he is unpredictable, and he is potentially dangerous, and he changes his mind a lot. So I think that the warmth that appears to be there between Starmer and Trump right now, I think it's largely premised on Starmer agreeing with Trump on almost everything, and I wouldn't rely on it. The deals that have been signed are agreements in principle. They're not final deals, and I'd love to say a few words about the £150 billion investment, because I have to make it clear here that I've looked into this. The 100 billion of that is coming from Blackstone. Now, Blackstone have invested 70 billion over recent years anyway. Blackstone are always going to be employing capital, investing capital in London and the UK. So I do not believe for a minute that Blackstone's investment has anything to do with Trump or Starmer. And similarly, Google and Microsoft have huge HQs here. They don't have their European headquarters, but their biggest numbers of European staff are based in London. They spend billions here, as do many US businesses. And I'm certain that what Trump and Starmer did was a political trick, where they looked to see what was in the pipeline about to be officially announced by companies, and they gathered them together and announced them just when the spotlight was on Trump and Starmer, to make it look like they had made it happen. But these things were happening anyway. Certainly this summer, the 100 billion investment from Blackstone was already widely talked about.
Some interesting analysis there. We're focusing on probably likely one of the most contentious issues in the UK at this moment, and particularly with the US, as Trump's deploying ICE Did Trump's rhetoric on migration risk overshadowing Starmer's more measured approach? Could Trump's comments influence future UK public debate on this?
So yes, Trump's comments chime with the general feeling out there in Britain. People in Britain are frustrated, confused, and angry that the Channel boat crossings of that wave of illegal immigration, that isn't being stopped, that doesn't seem to be able to be stopped. And there is a sense that somebody really strong, like Trump, could do that. Of course, within the law, I'm not sure it's that easy, but the public has a sense that Trump could stop it. The pressure on Starmer over this issue is monstrous, and he's going to have to try and do something. And I think Trump making that statement, however it may have been slightly naive, is going to put more pressure on Starmer to do something, to be seen to be tough, and I think it will be good for Britain and good for Starmer. So I think Starmer will benefit from Trump's words there.
Staying with the pressure on Starmer, we've seen Lord Mandelson's sacking very recently, and both were quite eager to distance themselves from such an issue. What do you make of that?
Starmer has made almost countless dreadful appointments, from his very first, which was Sue Gray, who was going to be running number 10 Downing Street, down to ministers who he appointed who turned out to be convicted fraudsters. Excuse me, there's a big military aircraft going overhead. I don't know if you can hear that. Forgive me. Louise Haigh was appointed as a transport minister, and then turned out she'd received police action for fraud in the past. We've had government-related members of parliament punching constituents. We've had the anti-corruption minister who got embroiled in a corruption scandal. It's been non-stop scandal. All appointees of Keir Starmer who have turned out to be completely bad appointments. And Mandelson has brought this home in a spectacularly bad way, where Mandelson had an astonishingly bad track record. He had to resign from government twice after numerous scandals, usually about appearing to enrich himself or get close to the wrong oligarchs, the wrong rich people. And then it turns out that he was obviously very close to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Not just close to him, but after Epstein's conviction, Mandelson remained close to him and continued to engage with him, and even encouraged him to appeal against his sentence. So the appointment of Mandelson by Starmer, it's officially a political appointment, the appointment of Mandelson by Starmer was an astonishingly bad error of judgment. And the interesting thing about the Mandelson story is it will rumble on and go on as the Epstein story goes on and on in America for Trump. So this is going to be non-stop bad news for Keir Starmer. But right now, I have to say, the public perception is that the official visit went well. People are very proud of their royal family for hosting such amazing events. People are pleased that we seem to be close with the world, still very close with the world's most powerful nation. And that's what's getting the headlines. There's a minor improvement in sentiment, and people feel a bit better in the last couple of days.
I mean, you're right in saying it's hard not to see the images coming out of Windsor Castle and thinking you wish you were there. But focusing as elsewhere at Chequers, was Trump's refusal to criticise European free speech laws a deliberate attempt to avoid confrontation with Starmer?
Yeah, I think what we saw was a really measured Donald Trump. I mean, I think I noticed it probably about a year before his election, so 2 years, coming up to 2 years ago now. He changed, and I have a theory, a personal theory, it might be illness related, but I can't substantiate that. But Trump changed. His voice changed slightly. He became less shouty, a little bit more predictable overall. And when you see Trump interviewed now, he's generally more measured. He was extremely measured and diplomatic and quite gracious over the last few days. Even when journalists have given him tricky questions that would normally inspire him to be angry and lash out, he was very measured, and I think he interacted very well with Starmer and was gracious.
And lastly, I just want to get in here a pretty simple question. Is the special relationship intact? Is it stronger than it's been before? Is this a match made in heaven with two political leaders that we never saw coming?
Is it a match made in heaven? Gosh, that's a good question. The thing is, we're dealing with Donald Trump. Donald Trump falls out with everyone. I was going to say eventually, but usually quite quickly. But he pretty much falls out with everyone. So I think we have to be wary of thinking that this might last. I'll tell you how long this will last. This will last for as long as Keir Starmer agrees with Trump on almost everything. So long as Keir Starmer keeps doing that, we'll be best of buddies. The problem is, I think Trump is liable to ratchet up tariff threats, ratchet up other criticisms, be Donald Trump. And so I think it's going to be very hard for Starmer to retain his dignity and credibility with his own party while not disagreeing with Trump. So I would imagine it's difficult. There is a relationship between Britain and the USA. How special it is depends on who you ask. But it feels special right now, just after the visit.
Well, good to end on a positive note. Thank you very much. Sadly, that's all we have time for. But I want to thank you for your insights, Andy, and hope to have you again on soon. Welcome back to A News. Now let's take a closer look at the key stories shaping the region. Today, Azerbaijan marks the second anniversary of local anti-terror measures in the Karabakh region. On the 19th of September in 2023, an operation was launched to restore the country's constitutional order. Lasting less than 24 hours, it enabled Azerbaijan to fully restore its sovereignty. This victory by the Azerbaijani army also holds great significance for ensuring lasting peace in the future.
It has been 2 years since the Azerbaijani army carried out local anti-terror measures in the Karabakh Economic Region. Launched on the 19th of September in 2023, an operation aimed to restore the country's constitutional order. Baku's main objectives were to ensure the implementation of the trilateral statement, prevent large-scale provocations in the Karabakh Economic Zone region, and disarm Armenian armed formations from Azerbaijani territory. Using precision-guided weapons, frontline and rear positions of Armenian armed forces, long-term firing points, as well as combat equipment and military facilities, were destroyed. During these local anti-terror measures, civilians and civilian infrastructure were not targeted. Armenian military personnel, running low on ammunition, abandoned their combat positions in disarray and panic. As a result of these anti-terror measures, Armenia's illegal military formations surrendered in less than 24 hours. This victory enabled Azerbaijan to fully restore its state sovereignty and territorial integrity and brought an end to separatism in Karabakh. The successful operation has prevented years of provocations and illegal actions by Armenia. During the local anti-terror measures, 192 Azerbaijani soldiers were killed. According to the decree signed by President Ilham Aliyev, the 20th of September is annually celebrated as State Sovereignty Day in Azerbaijan.
Continuing in Azerbaijan, European Commissioner for Enlargement Marta Kos visited Azerbaijan's Agdam to observe mine clearance and reconstruction efforts in liberated areas. During her visit, she praised Azerbaijan's rebuilding work and highlighted the importance of peace, regional development and EU support in sectors such as healthcare, energy and transport.
The European Commissioner for Enlargement says she's impressed with the work being done to clear mines in liberated areas of Azerbaijan. During her 3-day visit to the Caucasus region, Marta Kos went to Agdam, a city in Karabakh. She was shown how mines are being cleared and saw new reconstruction work.
Unbelievable what your country is doing here, building up this area which was so many years in war and destroyed. I admire the courage of your government to build new cities, to build new facilities so that people will come back. I have learned a lot today, and there are 3 lectures or points I would like to stress. First, no war is good. War is ruining people's life, and war is always full of consequences, and the wounds are deep. Secondly, it is possible, if you are for the peace, that you build on this vision that you have to stop the war and that you have to do something for the peace. And this is what Azerbaijan and Armenia have done. And the third point is the European Union is willing to help. I hope that I will be able to sign the financial agreement today, which will enable us to put also some money in this area, especially in the healthcare system. And I'm really looking forward to bring the relations between Azerbaijan and the European Union on a new level.
Since 2020, there have been more than 220,000 hectares in Karabakh and eastern Zangezur that have been cleared of mines and explosive remnants of war, according to the Azerbaijan National Agency for Mine Action. In total, more than 38,000 anti-personnel mines were cleared, more than 22,000 anti-tank mines and 148,000 unexploded ordnance items were neutralised, making more than 209,000 items safely removed. The work is done manually, with mechanical equipment and mine-detecting dogs. Koss's visit coincides with a crucial phase of the Armenia-Azerbaijan peace process and provides an opportunity to present the EU's inter-regional relations agenda as a tangible contribution to regional development. In addition, Commissioner Koss discussed shared strategic interests with the Azerbaijani authorities, including energy, transport and anti-mine efforts.
The European Union and Azerbaijan will create a high-level economic working group to strengthen ties and future cooperation. EU's Enlargement Commissioner Marta Koss made the comment on X after her meeting with Azerbaijan's Economy Minister Mikhail Jabarov in Baku. They both highlighted how peace in the region can now open up opportunities for markets, trade and investment. Following the EU Commissioner's visit to Baku, we look at Brussels' wider perspective. The European Commission has just unveiled its Resilience 2.0 Strategic Foresight Report, outlining how the EU aims to stay strong in a changing world with areas that could also shape cooperation with Azerbaijan.
The report warns Europe must anticipate and adapt, not just react. It lists 4 core risks: economic competitiveness squeezed by strategic dependencies, runaway technologies such as AI, demographic decline and mental health pressures, and democratic erosion from disinformation and foreign meddling. Brussels lays out 8 action areas, from a clearer global vision and stronger internal and external security, to technology sovereignty, a circular low-carbon economy, education reform and policies for intergenerational fairness. For Azerbaijan, several links are clear. First, energy. Even as Europe speeds its green transition, it will keep relying on secure gas supplies during the changeover. Azerbaijan's natural gas and vast wind and solar potential remain key to EU plans for reliable, cleaner energy. Second, regional connectivity. Lasting peace between Baku and Yerevan and the opening of routes such as the Zangezur corridor would help Europe diversify trade and transport links. Third, digital infrastructure. Projects like the Digital Silk Road and Smart City Zones in Karabakh and Eastern Zangezur match Europe's drive to diversify data routes and build trusted technology corridors. The EU admits it can no longer count on stability or industrial dominance alone. Technology leadership and strategic autonomy are now decisive. By coupling foresight with cooperation, Brussels signals that its partnership with Baku can evolve with the green and digital transformations while reinforcing peace and connectivity across the wider region.
Now to Turkey, where firefighters are battling 2 fast-spreading forest fires, one in Antalya's Alanya district and another in Muğla's Milaş district. Strong winds are fueling both blazes, pushing them close to residential areas. A forest fire that broke out in the Ali Fendi neighborhood of Alanya in Turkey's Antalya province is threatening nearby homes and farmland. The flames, driven by strong winds, have spread rapidly, forcing the evacuation of several houses and damaging greenhouses and gardens. Firefighters and AFAD emergency teams have been deployed with a precautionary power cut imposed in the area. Meanwhile, in Muğla's Milaş district, another blaze has erupted and spread into nearby forest land. Fire crews from the Muğla Regional Directorate of Forestry are battling the flames. Authorities say there have been no casualties reported so far. Focusing on politics, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan welcomed Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas at the presidential complex in Ankara on Thursday. Speaking during the meeting with Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas, Erdogan said Israel continues to undermine peace and vowed that Turkey will be the voice of Palestine at the UN General Assembly. He added that Ankara will continue to raise the Palestinian issue on every platform. President Erdogan emphasized that securing an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and ending the humanitarian crisis are Turkey's priorities. Now, Iran's top security official, Ali Larijani, says Tehran and Riyadh have agreed to boost cooperation in economic, defense and regional affairs following his meetings with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and Defense Minister Khalid bin Salman in Riyadh. Taraj Shiralilu has more from Tehran.
Iran's Secretary of the Supreme National Security Council, SNSC, Ali Larijani, said that expansion of ties with Saudi Arabia in economic, defense, and regional cooperation was discussed during his recent visit to Riyadh in meetings with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and Defense Minister Khalid bin Salman. In an interview with state IRIB TV after returning to Tehran, the top-ranking security official added that it was decided working groups will be established to follow up the discussions and agreements reached during his visit. Larijani visited the Persian Gulf neighboring Saudi Arabia upon invitation of Defense Minister Khalid bin Salman, who had paid a visit to Tehran on 17th of April and submitted the written message of King Salman bin Abdulaziz. Iran's security chief referred to the unsatisfactory level of bilateral relations with Saudi Arabia and said that both sides exchanged views on defense cooperation, examined the obstacles to expand economic ties, and reviewed solutions for regional stability. Tehran and Riyadh are two powerhouses in the Middle East and have been mending and advancing their bilateral diplomatic ties through high-level visits and contacts. Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman met on Monday in Doha, Qatar, on the sidelines of the Islamic Arab Summit held in the wake of Israel's airstrikes on Palestinian leaders who were meeting in Qatar to discuss U.S. President's ceasefire proposal. Iran has grabbed Israel's violation of Qatar's sovereignty, which is a close U.S. ally in the region, hosting the Al Udeid airbase on its soil, as a golden opportunity to improve its relations with the neighboring Arab countries, especially Saudi Arabia and other Middle East states. Riyadh was Larijani's third foreign destination. The influential SNSC secretary traveled to Iraq and Lebanon last month and also met Russian President in Kremlin before his reassignment at the top security position on the 7th of August. Turaj Shiralilu, reporting for A News TV, Tehran.
Welcome back to A News. Now, 2 years on since Azerbaijan fully restored its sovereignty over the remainder of Karabakh, removing a key obstacle to a bilateral peace process with Armenia, Baku and Yerevan have now initialed a peace agreement, formally committing themselves to its most full signing. Most notably, a major breakthrough in this evolving process has also been marked by the Connectivity Agreement on the Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity, or TRIP, which should enable Azerbaijan to secure an unhindered connection with its Nakhchivan enclave via Armenian territory. The 19th September 2023 anti-terror operation in Karabakh was a lightning offensive that led to the dissolution of the separatist entity in Kankandi, resulting in the full restoration of Azerbaijani sovereignty. This, in turn, enabled Baku and Yerevan to move towards direct bilateral negotiations, with the issue of Karabakh effectively removed from the agenda. Armenia, which until late 2023 had insisted on provisions relating to the rights of the local Armenian population, ultimately agreed that this was an internal Azerbaijani matter. Now, in September 2025, the atmospheric surrounding the Azerbaijani-Armenian negotiations are widely regarded as more promising than ever. The bilateral Azerbaijani-Armenian peace process continues to be strongly supported by the United States, with President Donald Trump recently highlighting his personal role in the 8th of August breakthrough attained in Washington during a joint press conference with British Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer. Joining us now to discuss the significance of the events that took place 2 years ago and how they relate to developments unfolding today is Sultan Zahidov, leading advisor at the Air Center in Baku, Azerbaijan. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Looking back at the 19th of September 2023 operation in Karabakh, how decisive was it in shaping the subsequent phase of peace negotiations between Azerbaijan and Armenia?
As you have already mentioned, today marks the second year anniversary of the anti-terror measures carried out by Azerbaijani forces. This operation, as you mentioned, lasted for about 1 day, even less than 1 day. And as a result of these anti-terror measures, Azerbaijan took over the remaining parts of the Karabakh, Khankandi, Khojaly, Khotajand, thereby putting the last nail into the coffin of years-long separatism in this region. I believe that the anti-terror measures conducted by Azerbaijan, Azerbaijan fully restored its sovereignty and it ended the conflictual situation. At the same time, it brought a windows of opportunity for the peace and stability in the region. Because I believe from that moment on, the peace process between Azerbaijan and Armenia gained further traction. Because before, as you already mentioned, the Armenian side was speaking about the rights of the local population and stuff like that. But then in the end, they agreed that it was an internal matter of Azerbaijan, so that they don't have any right to interfere. And ultimately, the peace process gained traction, and consequently, in March 2025, the Ministries of Foreign Affairs of both Azerbaijan and Armenia issued a statement that the parties had agreed on the text of the peace treaty, which was ultimately initialed in Washington, August 8, 2025. So, looking from this perspective, we can see that the restoration of the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Azerbaijan as a result of the Second Karabakh War and anti-terror measures, at the same time brought this opportunity to end years-long conflict and to establish, let's say, to mend relationship and establish stability and security in the South Caucasus region. Of course, there are certain obstacles remaining, and one of them was related to the OEC Minsk group, and that one was already resolved in September when the Minsk group, when OEC decided to revoke this institution, which was de facto defunct. And then I believe the peace process between Azerbaijan and Armenia right now has gained momentum, especially after the signing of the Washington Declaration in August 8th in Washington with the participation of Donald Trump. This declaration is not just about the future peace treaty, it's also about the opening of the communication lines, including the Zangezur corridor or TRIP, Trump Road for Prosperity.
If I may,
I believe,
Sultan, if I may, in retrospect, was the application of force within Azerbaijan's sovereign borders in Karabakh an absolute necessity for removing the deadlock in the peace process?
Well, I believe it was because we all know that before that, as a result of the Second Karabakh War, trilateral declaration was concluded between Azerbaijan and Armenia with participation of Russian Federation. And one of the points of that declaration clearly stated that all the illegal armed forces in Karabakh had to leave. But this withdrawal did not happen, and they were continuing to, let's say, to preserve their fake autonomy, fake authority in those areas, thereby threatening the the population living in the neighborhood, thereby provoking certain, let's say, destructive actions there. And hence, Azerbaijan did not have any choice other than, let's say, applying force, because we knew that they did not have any intention to leave it, to put aside separatism and, let's say, to abide by the international norms and principles. And by doing so, Azerbaijan once again showed its commitment to international rules and principles, because as a result of this operation, we all know that only legitimate military targets, only military legitimate objects were targeted, and ultimately we know that Azerbaijan restored its sovereignty and thereby opened new opportunities for peace and prosperity in the region.
It's interesting you mentioned that, but I want to focus on the international implications now. With strong US backing, especially regarding the Zangezur corridor or the Trump route for international peace and prosperity, do you think the Azerbaijani-Armenian peace process is still truly bilateral?
Well, I believe it mostly depends on the willing of the parties engaged. Because, external powers, sometimes they might definitely help, as in the case of the Washington Declaration. We definitely convey our gratitude to Donald Trump for his initiative. Ultimately, peace declaration was signed, which I believe marks a milestone in terms of mending relationship between Azerbaijan and Armenia, yes? But before that, there were certain attempts to mediate between Azerbaijan and Armenia, and those attempts failed due to the several reasons. And most importantly, first of all, there was a certain resentment and discontent between the parties engaged. And Azerbaijan sometimes had to mediate between the mediators, as Ceyhun Bayramov famously mentioned it. And on the other hand, some of the actors, they were trying to pursue their own geopolitical ambitions and goals rather than facilitating peace in the region. So therefore, those efforts did not yield productive results, and ultimately, we know that the bilateral process broke out, which ultimately resulted in the agreement on the text of the peace treaty. And then, of course, United States initiated with a certain kind of assistance, to which Azerbaijan responded positively, as we all know that even though Azerbaijani territories had been under occupation for approximately 30 years, it was Azerbaijan, after the Second Karabakh War, which initiated the peace process and decided to open a new chapter in the relationship of Azerbaijan and Armenia. So we saw this assistance and willingness from the states to help, and ultimately the Washington meeting took place and declaration was signed. But nevertheless, there is still an obstacle remaining, and that obstacle is related to the Constitution of Armenia, the preamble of which refers to
Sultan,
Armenian
I do apologise for interrupting you, but I just want to get this question in here before we do run out of time. Focusing on today's and yesterday, in light of EU Enlargement Commissioner Marta Kos' visit to Azerbaijan and to Armenia later today, how do you see the Zangezur corridor fitting within the EU's broader cross-regional connectivity agenda? Could it serve as a concrete contribution to regional development?
Well, definitely, because EU is interested in the diversification of connectivity, especially in the wake of after the Russia-Ukrainian war. European Union is interested to get alternative routes to Central Asia and to China, and the South Caucasus definitely provides one such route for them. And opening of the Zangezur corridor will even further boost the connectivity between the European Union and Central Asia and China, and ultimately lead to the development of not just the South Caucasus region, but also the EU, China, and entire Eurasian region. So therefore, I believe this visit of the EU Commissioner is not a coincidence. Once again, European Union signals that they are interested in the opening of the Trump corridor.
Well, that's all we have time for today, Sultan, but I do want to thank you for taking time out of your day to speak with us about this very contentious matter. Thank you.
It was a pleasure for me. Thanks for the invitation.
You're up to date with the world news for the hour. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to A News.